This panel is on the future of comic books. And we have a cast of some great characters on this panel right now. I'm going to let everybody introduce themselves individually. But if you're here and you're interested in comic books and you're passionate about comic books, and like myself, and I think most of us up here, if you're a true comic geek, you're going to really enjoy this panel as to where this industry is going. And let me start by introducing myself. My name is David Uslan, and I am Michael's son, and I am head of business development for a wonderful company called Graphically. And what Graphically is, we are one of the two leading digital comic book distribution companies out there. We deal with and distribute most of the bigger publishers' content like Marvel and Top Cow and Boom and IDW, as well as focusing on independent and small press content, getting them out across a wide variety of platforms, and really catering to both the traditional comic fan and the non-traditional comic fan, and hoping to raise awareness, bringing in new fans, kids into comic books, and just increasing the exposure of comic books in general. And I have the pleasure of working with everybody that's on this panel today and distributing their content, which we'll talk about later. But that's my world.
All right. My name is Forney. I am self-publishing Scarlet Huntress, and I just signed up to put the book on Graphically, and I also have it on Drive-Thru Comics, so that's why I'm here.
Lora, I do The Dreamer with IDW. It's also online.
My name is Thom Zahler. I write and draw a book called Love and Tapes.
I'm Michael Uslan. I make movies and I write comic books, and I am a true believer, as Stan Lee would say, in the future of comics being in the digital field. Not that their backs will be turned on print, but I think the only way this industry is going to survive and thrive is through the digital world.
So what we'd like to do today, I think it would be interesting, is kind of keep this panel as in almost like a roundtable discussion, where I think each of us will be asking each other questions, getting to know each one of us a little bit better, as well as asking you guys questions. You guys can ask questions throughout the panel, and also for a lucky number of you guys, I have some great Graphically T-shirts here. So if you're if you'd like to ask a question, then you're going to get a nice little gift. I think we should start. I'd like to know out of the audience who here reads comic books on their computer or on their phones. And out of you guys, who here has like an iPhone or an iPad? And then the remaining of you, who has like a Google Android phone, some type of Droid? And then the rest of you, do any of you read on BlackBerry? Okay. So obviously there is a number of platforms out there that you can read comic books on, ranging from the desktop to different types of mobile platforms. And what's exciting to me is I'm a true second-generation comic nerd, and it's all about making that content interesting and heightening the experience and finding new ways to see books that you would never see in a comic book store. And the reason that I became a part of Graphically is that Graphically can provide the platforms to take comic books that maybe only 5,000 copies have been printed or less, and be able to distribute those and get them to audiences like you, where you would have an equal opportunity of reading a Marvel comic book right alongside of a Love and Tapes, or even a really small press indie book that only sells at conventions like today. So in terms of exposure, the digital age provides a really great way to get content out there, to generate revenue for creators who have trouble setting up their books with publishers. as one question that I have for each of the creators, because every creator is different, whether you're a writer or whether you're an artist, I'm always interested to know how a creator views the digital space, if it makes things easier for them, if it makes drawing content easier for them, if they're interested in the different platforms, the other things you can do with digital that you can't do with comic books, such as adding in all sorts of extras, tying in motion comics, tying in all these other things that are out there right now into comic books that, you know, can increase the awareness and can increase, you know, how interested you as a fan can be over that comic book. So I'd like to know from each of you, what is so appealing about digital comic books and getting your particular books out on the digital field?
What I like about the digital stuff is I can get my book out to more people than I can, because I can only go to so many shows throughout a year, and I do the very small press, like David mentioned. I'm the guy that only sells books at shows. And the other thing I like is a friend and I just recently got together, and he's actually going to license my character to make a game available, and he can actually sell the game online as a digital download as well. And I like that aspect of being able to do stuff that ordinarily I probably wouldn't be able to afford to make all these things happen. I can do it because it's available as a digital format.
For me, I think the thing that drew me to the web initially was that my book isn't what you would find in a comic book store traditionally. There's no superheroes, there's no zombies, there's no monsters, there's no aliens. It's a history book. And it's a high school book for kind of for girls. So I figured if I put it on the web first, I would have a chance to find my audience there. And my reader is either older gentlemen who have a big history, you know, a big interest in history, reenactors and teachers and stuff like that, or young girls between ages 14 and 34. Neither which demographic really is the comic book, the typical comic book shopper. So I decided to launch The Dreamer as a webcomic, and that was 3 years ago. It's been going nonstop since then. We've got a huge readership, and I was able to take my stats to a publisher then and say, here's how many people read every Friday when I update. And it made me a lot more marketable to a big publisher because I could prove that people wanted to read the book, and I could prove that there was an audience there. So I still update all the time, but I'm still publishing. So I think the two can work hand in hand, which is what I'm doing.
To me, it's just always been another channel. I don't see a reason to make it difficult for anyone to give me money for my book in any way possible. So when I started mine out, it was a print comic, but I figured out a way to do it in 4-panel increments so that it fit on a normal monitor better and was easier to put up there. So just whatever I could do to make it get out there so people could see it and click on it, because I believed in it enough that I thought if people started reading it, they would probably not stop reading it. I've been very lucky as far as that went.
I'll give you a different perspective. One is about fans and one is about creators. Recently I lectured in Cleveland at Case Western Reserve, and it was a Wednesday. And as I finished the lecture, there were a lot of comic book fans there. I said, all right, where do I go downtown Cleveland to buy my comic books today? It's Wednesday. And they said, you've got to drive like 30 minutes from here before you can find a comic book store. And that set us into an impromptu discussion about digital. And they said, go back to New York and tell the guys you know at the big comic book companies, don't sell us for $4 one comic book on that digital format. Tell them for like 20 or 25 bucks, give us access to everything they have. Let us go back into the business of being fans of an entire line of different companies. You know, you can't have 12 Thor titles and expect me to be a Thor completist and still have money left over for Spider-Man or Avengers. This way, we can be fans, we can be supportive, and you can get out to the biggest possible audience. From the creator's point of view, the creators who have come to me, they say, I hope digital is an answer I can't get from the big comic book companies, because as a creator, when I pitch my thing to them, if they want to publish it, they want to take movie rights, they want to take TV rights, they want to take animation rights. They want to take merchandising rights. They want to take new media rights. If we go digital with this, is there a chance at least I can retain all or part of these rights and finally let the creator make the kind of money that he should be making for his own creation? And that's another reason I think digital could be incredibly attractive, not just for fans, but for creators as well.
Plus, for an independent creator, they can save a lot of money by not physically publishing a book. If you concentrate on the digital aspects, you can do your artwork, you can write your scripts, and focus on just distributing your stuff digitally. Physical publication is expensive nowadays. That's why you see so many of these major publishers cutting the number of books. That's why you see creators that aren't able to get their books published by major creators. It's expensive. I think everybody here can agree that comic books, have been a lost leader for a long time now. Everybody sees what's happening to the publishing world. So digital is the way to go. The question for graphically is how to make digital new and refreshing. There are a number of digital distributors out there that pretty much take a comic book and just convert it to a digital file and distribute it. And to us hardcore fans, that's great. I mean, you can get a digital version of your book, but that's purely focusing on the hardcore fans. And this business is about bringing in new fans, developing new properties, increasing awareness. So from graphically standpoint, how do we do that? What's the way to do that? And by a show of hands, how many people here are on Facebook? And how many people here use Twitter? So the social movement in the digital space is huge right now. I think everybody sees it. I mean, there are billions of people, it seems like, that are on Facebook. There are millions of people that use Twitter every day. And social is a huge, huge component of anything in the digital realm right now. Graphically has done something very interesting. This is one of the reasons that excited me about coming out and being a part of this company, where graphically focuses on a social environment and connecting it to comic books. Within the graphically platforms, we have developed a social environment where you can converse with one another, like Facebook, where you can talk about comics, where you can promote comics. Everybody knows that this business is all about spreading the word, and it's all about talking to one another and telling somebody, hey, I just found this really cool new book, it's awesome, you got to go and pick it up. I mean, that's what this business is based on, and that's what we're trying to bring to the digital space. It's also a wonderful way to bring in creators and allow creators to interact with the fans. I mean, you come to conventions like this and you see the lines for people like Murphy Anderson, for people like Al Bellman, for people like that are sitting up on this panel. Fans love to interact with creators and artists. They love to get artwork. They love to talk about why creators are inspired to do whatever they do with their books. The reasons why they do what they do. And this social component of graphically allows fans to do that. Our CEO had a great pitch. It was one of the things that really brought a smile to my face when I first heard about Graphically. Graphically is trying to be the couch in the middle of the hip new comic book store, where a fan can sit side by side next to another fan and a creator, talk about everything that has to do with comic books and pop culture as it relates to comic books, and really feel like they're a part of this industry. Like they might actually be able to influence a creator over the direction of his books, to really feel a part of this world. And that's a great way to increase exposure and to bring in new audiences into comic books. And especially if you're in the independent world, it's a great place to get your book out there and to increase that awareness. And that's what we're looking to do for all content, especially for content like everybody who's up on this panel, to help them increase awareness, to get out that exposure, to be on every platform as possible and be able to tap into worldwide audiences. And I'll let my dad speak a little bit more to this, but in terms of adapting content to feature film and television, it's very important now to support what you're doing with numbers. And as the comic book business dies, and you get comic books that only sell, again, a couple hundred or a couple thousand books, it doesn't really have, it doesn't excite people, especially in the studio system, the way you would hope it would. So by getting your books out digitally, all of a sudden you're talking about a book that published 5,000 copies, all of a sudden you're talking about, 100,000 downloads. It could actually, depending on your distribution network, it could hit over 1 million. You look at motion comics now, and how many of you have seen motion comics? All right, so motion comics is a great new part of the comic industry where you're taking pre-existing artwork or new artwork, adding animation to it, and creating motion comics, this new platform of getting material out. One of the most popular ones that came out recently was the Watchmen comics. That really brought motion comics to everybody's attention. And there's been some new stuff that have come out recently, like the Astonishing X-Men books that have been adapted to motion comics, Batman Black and White. You're seeing a lot of independent companies doing motion comics now. And motion comics has the great ability to tap into kids, because kids love animation. Kids love cartoons. And this is adding that cartoon feeling to comic books. So again, it's all about increasing that exposure, that awareness, changing the experience. Graphically is bringing in motion comic books as well into our platform. There are a number of publishers out there that just do motion comics and don't have any original comic book material behind it, because they're trying new ways to get their ideas out to new audiences. So that really, really excites us. And Dad, why don't you talk about some of the biggest comic book movies that have actually been based on comic books with low print runs, rather than the huge mainstream branded stuff that you've worked on?
Yeah, well, part of the barrier that I ran into in the Hollywood industry for so many years was a preconceived notion that the only comic books that could ever be successful as movies were things that have been around 25, 50, 75 years, thus Superman, Batman, Spider-Man qualified. And we were constantly, and have been for decades, in the battles, in the trenches, to convince them that they are wrong, that it's really about great characters and great stories. And I said, if you take Batman and Superman and Spider-Man out of the loop for the time being, some of the most successful comic book franchises over the decades have been Men in Black. That was a comic book that I don't think ever sold more than 2,000 copies. And look at what a franchise that has spawned. The Mask, another comic that had a very, very, very low print run. And maybe the lowest of all, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So it has finally sunk into their heads that this is really possible. And I'm happy to say, based on what you were just talking about with the great work that you're doing, they're finally getting it through their heads that superheroes aren't the be-all and end-all. They're not synonymous with comics. And when you tell people Road to Perdition was based on a comic, History of Violence was based on a comic, The 300 was based on a comic, it is a Hollywood eye-opener. That, yes, how about that? There are other genres that can work here. Genres you will find if you walk into a Borders or Barnes & Noble on their shelves. You can find the same things in comic books and graphic novels, and we can bring that to you. And I have one question for everybody. In the world of movies, both live action and animated right now, creators, directors, filmmakers are very excited largely by the new toy known as 3D. In the world of digital comics and where digital comics is going, if amazing 3D capabilities come about, is that something you would embrace or something you would reject in terms of the work you're doing and the way you're creating?
Well, I wouldn't run away from it. My book is not out there enough that I would be doing 3D on it, because it's mostly characters sitting around talking, which I don't think you necessarily need in 3D. But I would probably find a way to use that on another project, because I don't like leaving tools on the table.
You mean 3D like Avatar is in 3D, or 3D like Pixar films, like 3D animation?
Depending on what you have, where you bring a comic book to life, just pop the size of the page, or give you incredible depth.
I guess I'd have to be I'd have to see it. I have a friend that does CG webcomics, where it's like computer generated like a Pixar film, and he poses all the characters and takes screenshots. And he has, on his digital downloads, some of the panels are animated, which is kind of fun. And I think that that's like a really neat thing, but it's so expensive for him. Because every time there's a new scene or whatever, it all needs rendered, all the characters need designed, they need built. And so he's actually just, setting the lights and the camera and all that every week to week, but in the back end is just, it's far more expensive than just drawing. So I guess I'd have to see how it played out, if it was affordable.
I guess I would agree with what Laura said about seeing what it looks like first. I'd be open to it. I guess it would be whether or not I would physically be able to do it or would I have to hire someone. That's, I guess, where my hindrance in doing it would come in is, do I need to pay somebody to come in and create something for me as opposed to creating it myself? I do a lot of stuff with, Photoshop, Illustrator, and that kind of thing, but some of that stuff's beyond me with the 3D thing, so I don't know yet.
I think 3D is great. I think 3D is wonderful for comic books. Whether it works or not, based on the property per se, it might not work for that property, but bringing in 3D into comic books, especially in the digital landscape, is just another way to heighten the experience. 3D and comic books have been synonymous since the 50s, maybe before. And, they've always gone hand in hand. And I think that by bringing it into the digital space, again, it allows, whether it's one person out of all of you who totally digs 3D, that brings that person into comic books in the digital world. And that's the most important thing here. Graphically is talking to actually some 3D companies right now, especially when looking at the iPhone or the iPad gadgets that are doing some amazing things. And I'm not trying to convince you, Laura, whether it's the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do, but one of the things that I've seen recently is there are companies out there that have perfected depth within 3D comic books. So imagine looking at one of your battle scenes in your comic books and being able to look in that Revolutionary War scene or whatever and literally looking into a book and thinking that it's going on for 3 miles. And what that depth perception can bring to comic books. At San Diego Comic-Con this year, we had this company out there with us. And one of Graphically's strong partners is HP. And the CTO, the Chief Technical Officer of HP, was with us and was looking at this company's technology. And literally that night blogged that it was the coolest thing that he saw at San Diego Comic-Con. And one of the things that won me over was they took this image from a Marvel comic book where it was from some X-Men book, I forget how long ago, where they were flying over the Grand Canyon, and it was this scene that was kind of shot from above. I think it was one of Phil Jimenez's books, and you see they're literally whatever shuttle, whatever aircraft they were using, it's flying over the Grand Canyon, and they took this image and they laid it on the floor. And I stood over this image, literally, and it was like looking down 3 miles into the floor. And it just creates an experience that you cannot find anywhere else. And it was so appealing to me that that was the convincing factor that we have to incorporate 3D. Whether you like it or not, at least give you the option of using that technology and bringing it into our platforms. One of the other things that I'd like to discuss real quickly is also the audience per book, particular book, especially tapping into new audiences that typically aren't comic book fans. And I know that Thom and Lora, you both mentioned that female audiences, you have strong female audiences. And female audiences for the most part aren't your traditional comic book fan. And it is very interesting to me when I hear books that have a strong female or whatever that demographic is that is in your traditional fan base. And it always interests me about how to exploit that and how to increase that. Again, it's all about bringing in new audiences. So can you guys tell me a little bit more, like when your books were set up with IDW, when they came in and published your material, what did that do for your fan base? Did it increase the female awareness? Did you guys see new fans coming to you? You know, how did you feel that by bringing on a big publisher, how did that affect your books?
I actually don't have good metrics on that. Free Comic Book Day has been the thing that's promoted my book the most, because that's where it's gotten it out to new publishers, out to new readers, where people who wouldn't normally have seen it, since they can get it for free, pick it up. And that's a day when a lot of families come to comic book shops. So there's more women tagging along with a more male demographic, where they'll pick something up that they haven't seen before. The thing that has really helped with IDW doing the trade is that it's gotten it out to a lot more people, and it's in a much more appealing chunk, kind of the way that people buy DVD sets. If you don't buy one episode of Big Bang Theory, you buy season 3. So that's how I viewed having IDW do the trades, is that they're DVD sets of the entire book. Now when I go to conventions, I have all my books set up with me, and I rarely sell individual issues. But if I don't have them there, the visual of you getting all 6 pieces in this one trade doesn't sell as well. So the individual issues are actually more kind of a compare and contrast, and it's easier to sell the trades after that.
I would say that going with IDW and getting the comic into bookstores and comic shops maybe it's brought me more male readers than female readers. I found that, well, it's hard to tell, but you know, when I go to Free Comic Book Day or anything that's like a comic book world oriented thing, I meet tons of guy readers, but they're not as interactive online. So the ones that I interact with online are usually young girls, because they're just so into the social aspect of being online. They can't all be lying. I did an anime convention this summer, and I met tons of my readers there, and they were all high school girls and college girls. So that's kind of, they don't hang out in the same places. So I know that just having the book available at different places reaches different audiences. So it's definitely been beneficial for me.
There's something happened to me recently, which I think pretty much sums up the power of the digital space. And recently I got married, and my wife pretty much despises the comic book business. It would probably be about as hard for me to get her to pick up a comic book and read it as it would be for me to lift up a car outside. And she's the worst when it comes to comic books. God bless her for living with me in the number of comic book boxes I have in my apartment back in LA. But something happened which really opened up my eyes again to the potential of the digital space. About a month ago, maybe a little more, we were sitting in our living room, and I was having a conversation on the phone with Milo Ventimiglia, who was the lead in Heroes on TV. And even though Shayna, my wife, hated comic books, she sat and watched Heroes with me every week. And when I got off the phone call, and we were talking about a new book that Milo has with Pop Pal that we're going to be distributing, his book is one great example. It's called Berserker, and you can find it on Graphically. It's one great example of all these extra incentives you can bring to the digital space. We had Milo do voiceover commentary, which came with the book. We were able to include his inks and his pencils within the book. Graphically has this great ability, especially in the eye gadgets, where you can literally take your fingers and wipe away the color to the inks, and wipe away the inks to the pencils to see how the process is done. We incorporate the original artwork, the alternate artwork, the scripts, the alternate scripts. So we bring all this stuff to the table to change the experience, which is what we're going to be doing for all of the books from these creators up here. And when I got the phone, Shayna looked at me and she's like, "So you're working on a project with Milo Ventimiglia?" And I said, "Yeah." And she's like, "He's that cute guy from Heroes, right?" And I said, "Yeah." And she's like, "And you are working on his comic book?" "Yeah." And she's like, "Well, do you have that comic book?" I was like, "Sure, it's right here on my iPad." And she's like, "Really? Can I see it?" And I watched her on my couch read a comic book for the first time in the 7 years that I've been with her. And when she was done reading the comic book and listened to the voiceover commentary, she looked at me and she's like, "Wow, that was really interesting. It's a really graphic book, but it's really interesting." I said, "Yeah, it's a cool book. By the way, I'm like, one of the executive producers on Heroes is a friend of ours, and he's also a big comic book writer. His name is Jeff Loeb. And Jeff writes for Marvel. He's just done a whole bunch of Hulk stuff. And if you like this book, you might actually like some Hulk stuff. She's really? And it was by one of the guys behind Heroes? Yeah. And then I watched her sit down and read a Hulk comic book. And this is somebody who has fought me tooth and nail on reading anything that had to do with anything in comic books, except for my dad's Archie run recently. And it was amazing. And this is the core group of people that traditionally would not read comic books that I got to read comic books. And that is the potential of the digital space right there. That's why I'm most excited. That's why I think everybody on this panel is very excited, because it's that potential to tap into new audiences. And whether you have a book that's published by one of the big publishers like IDW, whether you have an independent book that you're out promoting yourself, that you're working on yourself, like Sean's book, you have this great ability to get your content to new audiences, and that's where the comic book industry is going. And with that, we have a couple minutes left. I'd like to open it up to questions. If you guys have any questions, and again, those of you who do have questions, got a nice little gift for you as well. Start with over there. Well, in terms of the digital space, there's really no restrictions. You could take a comic book that exists as the typical format, the typical number of panels per page. You don't have to distribute it like that digitally. Companies like Graphically can come in and cut up those books in really interesting ways. So when you read them, it's almost like it's popping out. So it doesn't have to be the traditional format.
For me, I'm loving Capes. Everything's a 4-panel grid, and every 4th panel is a beat. It's either a joke or a serious moment or something. But there's always something to make you feel like you've read a complete page. I find a lot of comics that are translated without thinking about going online. They don't have that sense of that somebody has completed something and they need to have a feeling of completion with it. I think John Byrne, when he was working on Superman, said that he ended every page with a cliffhanger. Not necessarily a huge cliffhanger, but something that made you want to turn the page. And I think you need to think about that when you're online, because I know when I'm online, I read stuff, but I'm also very distracted by my email, my Twitter, my Facebook, the TV on behind me, and all that stuff. So while it's great for me to be able to read, it's also really easily for me to be distracted. So I need to have some sense of either completion or something that makes me want to say, oh, I want to read more of that. I feel like I've gotten something, rather than, oh, that cut off abruptly in the middle of the story.
By the way, anybody who asks a question, come up afterwards for your t-shirts. Next question. Right there. Yes.
You have to wear the 3D glasses if you go 3D or digitally?
Right now, yes, you have to wear 3D glasses, although in the next year, there's a number of technology that's coming out where you don't have to wear 3D glasses. I don't know if any of you have seen some of the new 3D televisions that are coming out at E3 this year in Los Angeles, the big gaming convention. They showed off some new technology where you don't need to wear glasses, and I think that's where things are heading as well. Next question. If comic books are going digital, is print ever going to go out?
My comic was online for probably 2 years by the time that the collection came out, and the number one question that I was asked by the people who are reading it every week was, when is this going to come out in print so I can buy it? Now the number one question I get asked is, when is Volume 2 coming out? And this is being asked by readers, so it's not like it's content that they're waiting to be released, it's already out there. And so I think there's something to the graphic novel collection that collectors still really like to have, and it's the way that it's meant to be read. I mean, I think it ought to be written to work on the web and in the collection, but from my experience, I think they're both important, and I think that they will help each other.
I'm going to go back to my DVD analogy, because I watched every episode of Star Trek Deep Space Nine for free when it aired on Channel Channel 43 back home, but I still had to get the DVD box set. But there are other shows that I watch and I don't need in print, or I don't need to have a permanent collection of. So I think it might be a little more rarefied that people go for the print edition, but I don't think it's going to go away. I mean, they still make me turn off my iPhone for the first 20 minutes of the flight, so I need something.
I'm going to agree with what Thom said. I think you're going to have a couple of generations of people that are still going to want a floppy book. I'm a person that wants a floppy. I'll get a digital download. Same as like you said, I'll watch it on TV, go get the DVD later. But you're going to have several generations yet before it's totally wiped out. And by the time that gets around, there might be something new that these things will be printed on that'll be 3D and does who knows what.
I will never stop buying comic books. I think the collector market will always be around. I will always go into a comic book store every Wednesday. I plan on for the rest of my life and buy my hard comic books. But I will be using the digital space for all of those other extras that we talked about to heighten that experience. But I don't think that publishing will ever die out. I just think that it's going to change and adapt with the times. Next question.
I'll go, since my wife is an art teacher, and say go to school. That's a big portion of it, but taking the time to go to conventions, interact with all the other creators, ask questions like you just did, is a very huge portion of it. I wouldn't be doing any conventions if I wouldn't have gone and seen a panel back in 2003 saying, go and get a table at a convention set up, because I was trying to get my art out there, I was trying to get books out there and things like that. And that plays a very big role in insight from it. Get a degree in something. Let's, as most people would suggest, maybe get a backup degree in something, but it's a big portion of it.
For me, I would say lock yourself in a room with a desk, beat your head against it repeatedly, and get used to it. I think art classes are important. I don't think you necessarily need to have a degree in it, but you need some sort of training. It's just a question of how you find it. The big thing that I would say is make sure that you don't just look at one art form for whatever you're trying to do, because there are artists in the field who grew up reading comics and that's all they did, and their books look like a copy of a copy of a copy, where I pull a lot from animation. I was an art director for an ad agency, and there's a lot of design work in mine. And even when I was doing design work, people said, this doesn't look like things we've seen before, because I was pulling out of comics when I was doing design work. And when I do Loving Capes, I do a lot of designy stuff that shows up in there, and a lot of techniques that I learned from doing advertising work for so long, just how much I use the computer to get the book done at the pace that I'm able to do it. What you pull from the stuff that is not the field you're going into, I think, is what makes you unique in the field that you're going into.
My words of advice are just stay passionate. You need to be as passionate as you can be about whatever it is you're working on to make it in this business. It's hard and it's difficult, and it might not pay the bills, but as long as you're passionate and you're willing to give it your all, that's going to be the best thing that you can do, and just put yourself out there.
Playing off that, I had a teacher in art school who told me that comics were a dying field back in the 80s when I went to high school. And she told me that comics were a dying field, I could never make a living at it, and then I drive my convertible black every chance I get. Everybody's going to tell you can't do something. Those are the people that, you have to be realistic about it, but Kyle Baker has a great line where he says, people always say if you're going to go into art, what are you going to fall back on? But if you say you're going to be a lawyer, nobody asks you what are you going to fall back on if that doesn't work. So if you want to do it, do it.
I just want to add that with the digitization of comic books, there are new creative aspects. You don't have to be able to draw anything. You don't have to be able to write. There are technical ways you can get involved in the field. You can become a techie, and I've seen such creative stuff coming from the guys now on the technical side. It's a whole new thing. So, yeah. Well, you're like me. That side of your brain doesn't function too well. But isn't it wonderful to know they're over there making your stuff come to life? And when you've got good people over there, that's pretty incredible.
And I'll tell you this much: when you have something, when you have a completed project, come up after this panel. I'll give you my card, as to everybody here who's working on any independent comic books, and I'll be happy to help you get your book out in the digital space.
I was just going to say I married a web designer. That helps. I think my biggest piece of advice is just draw all of the time. Just have your sketchbook with you everywhere you go, and don't just draw the things you like. Don't just draw the things that come easy, but force yourself to draw things that are uncomfortable. Force yourself to draw backgrounds, draw from light, draw different shapes and colors of people than you're used to. Clothes that look like clothes and not spandex things with a couple lines where the joints are. If you can draw well, that's one of the biggest things that will set you apart, especially with the digital age. So many people will have the opportunity right now to make comics and to get it out there, but the ones that I find that are really notable and doing well are the guys that really know what they're doing and can make a beautiful product. So just because it's hard, don't do it. So if you're flexing the muscles that the other guys aren't willing to flex, then it'll pay off. People know.
I think that's all the time we have. I'd just like to say that the Dreamer and Loving Capes will be available starting this week on Graphically. Come check out their booths to buy their content. Sean's book, The Scarlet Huntress, will be available on Graphically shortly. Come check out his booth as well. Everybody go to graphically.com on their desktop, or search in the App Store for Graphically. Download our content, check it out, play with it. We're always available for comments and questions. Our entire company is based on our community. So whatever comments and questions you have, we always have open ears to them.
I'd like to do a commercial quickly for the next panel. It is the Legends Behind the Comic Books panel. Folks, you are privileged here in Cincinnati that there are 3 people who started in the golden age of comics, bridged the silver age of comics, and are still viable creatively today. You'll have a chance to meet Russ Heath. You'll have a chance to meet Al Bellman and Murphy Anderson, each one legends in their own right. It's such a golden opportunity. At San Diego Comic-Con and New York Comic-Con last year, these guys had a chance to appear on a panel, a presentation. They wound up getting a 3-minute standing ovation from all the fans for what they had created and what they've done and what they've contributed to what we all love so much. So if you can hang around at 1:15, it's going to be Legends Behind the Comic Books.
Thank you, everybody, and come up for your t-shirt.